Hello everyone, and welcome back to this look at Operation Return with none other than...
myself, Dr. Alex Clarke. This sounds weird on the third time doing it again. Hello everyone, how are you all? I hope you're enjoying this series. We're having a lot of fun recording it.
If the staff briefing was bad, then, well, what we're going to be talking about today might be worse, because we're actually going to talk about the Battle of Operation Return. So, I'll just add for context these maps. I think I showed them previously, which show Starfleet combining their various fleets, the Dominion forming to counter, and roughly the location where the battle takes place, because it basically just happens in deep space. And so you have this Dominion blockade facing off against the Federation fleet. So, as you can see here, the Federation is outnumbered 2-1.
Yes, but as we talked about before, if anyone had brought actually a decent maneuver fleet to that battle, they could have wrecked the other side.
So when you say a maneuver fleet, do you mean like lots of light cruisers or lighter, more maneuverable ships?
Well, yeah, as we've been talking about before, the big shortage there seems to be going on in the Federation fleet, especially, is the smaller ships. The Dominion do have a good maneuver force, but they don't have the middle of their fleet. And the Cardassian fleet is sufficiently regimented that one wonders if they can actually maneuver in anything other than straight lines.
Yes. Well, they can. I think what we see in this battle is the Cardassians exactly have two modes. They either stand in a line, or they descend into complete anarchy.
Yeah, they don't seem to... Well, the thing is, the Cardassians have a very strong command culture. And that means that their commanders are very much going to follow their command line and their discipline. They don't have a flexible command structure. That's the thing about the Federation. The one advantage they have of training for those 5-year patrols as solo ships, which is the most stupid thing to do with your ship ever known to mankind. But we'll leave that to one side. That's a major plot point in Star Trek, and I can't keep railing against it for every single episode of this, as annoying as I might find it, is that that does train ships to think independently as if they are solo ships. And then when they're working together, they cooperate, but they're also thinking about solo ships, so they're looking for opportunities themselves, which gives them a much more fluid dynamic when they're operating. The only problem the Federation have is that everything they have is a cruiser. It's a variation on the cruiser. Some of them are battleship cruisers. Some of them are frigate cruisers, and every cruiser in between. But everything realistically is a cruiser.
Yeah, and as you say, they can operate in squadrons, whereas, for the Cardassian specifically, and indeed I think in the Dominion, they can't conceive of anything other than a squadron or, similar sized units. That's because, again, actually, when we see Cardassians in just general rounded out, oftentimes it's going to be at least 2 gallows together, possibly generally 3, like when we've seen it in the regular series prior to the war.
Yeah, it's... Getting back to the whole briefing, the briefing was a nightmare. It was, and they asked such silly questions. As admirals, you sit there and go, this is why you have staff officers. And one of the reasons you have the staff officers is the admirals should never ask those questions like that. Because admirals, part of the reason they always need to inspire confidence of the other fleets around them and the personnel. So you have people on your team who ask the questions which need to be asked. So you can look like you know what you're doing as an admiral. And that sounds really superficial when you put it like that. But then when you think about it from the point of view of a personnel morale perspective, admirals are the people who are literally betting your lives.
Yes. You
That
need to have confidence in them.
Yeah, yeah. So this is why you have staff officers there, so that the staff officer can ask the question of, well, what about the defense of Earth?
Yes, and then Sisko, and that staff officer will be someone of equivalent rank. Although, again, who should Sisko be giving this briefing? That's another. That's a separate aside.
Coming from Sisko's team, Sisko would be leading the briefing, but each section of the briefing would be given by the specialist officer. So the logistics for it, the security, the intelligence analysts would give their intelligence brief. You'd start off with the intelligence, and then you go the operations, and then the logistics.
Yeah.
But you also need a fleet engineer in there to tell you about the engineering state of the fleet and explain in detail, because I can read, any officer in that room can read the report and go, this ship's available, this ship's not available. But is that ship not available because it's missing a single part, or is it not available because it's got major structural problems?
Yes. Is it missing an entire engine?
So I need an engineering assessment there. I need an engineer there to explain the likelihood of these ships getting... I can't go on best guess. And I was sitting there looking at, when I was watching that briefing, I was sitting there going, you're asking too many questions for this to be a post-briefing get-together and chat where you're rounding it up.
Yeah. This is the first time you're hearing of it, basically.
Yes. And that's not the scenario you need it to be in. It seems to me that again, I can understand they want to keep things small to save costs, but it forgets the human element of the conflicts they're in. Rather, what I would call the people element of it, the organic element of the conflict they're in. And you might you might go, well, if you've got less people involved, it's not going to be able to be leaked out much as easily. But actually, it's more likely to be leaked out, because if you consider this, in this scenario, every one of those admirals then has to go back and brief their staff themselves, who then have to brief their subordinates, who then have to brief their subordinates. Because you haven't had the people in the room to be able to work it out in the first place. And then they have to communicate it backwards and forwards, to sort it all out.
And then everyone's got to make sure that they're actually clear on the details, that there hasn't been any, Chinese whispers.
Yes. And, and this is just... It's just the way to cause trouble. It's the same reason why do you synchronize watches sometimes on operations and exercises. It's the same with synchronizing watches. Sometimes it's easier to make sure you have the people in the room so they can have a baseline of what you're doing.
Yeah. So getting onto the actual battle, given that that's what we're really here to discuss.
Yeah,
we've been over that.
I know, we're really here to discuss
times.
that, but it's a case of, that bit just annoys me.
Annoys, yeah. So, obviously the plan is developed by Sisko, and his initial plan is basically, he seems to be aware that the Dominion are going to outnumber him with a 2-to-1 force, and then he plans he plans accordingly. Basically, I think it's fair to say, to do a breakthrough attack. That's the only option left to him, is that they've got to spread themselves a little bit to cover all approaches. So the best thing he can do is go for a breakthrough attack and hope that he can just achieve a local superiority, and some ships will get through.
His aim. That is his aim, which is, to an extent, he's being forced in pace by what the Dominion are doing by taking down the minefield. So they're setting the clock for him. He's not able to set the time. He's not able to do, therefore, some elaborate maneuvers and feints.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been... I am surprised he didn't have other fleets along the border, along the touchline, try and go more active to try and distract forces while they were pulling up. I'd have said you need to do a lot more of that to try and pull as many of the forces away. And if they don't react well, then you start taking back territory. And that's always a good thing to both reassure your morale, but also, how do I put this, make them think that the attack is going somewhere else. I also would say that he's banking on his opponent's confidence making a mistake. He's banking on his opponent's ego. And he's kind of trying to borrow another completely different program called Suits motto. He's playing the man, not the cards. And that's what he's trying to do, because that's his only way of he's decided his only way of dealing with the number advantage is to play the man, not the cards.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure about that as a policy, but it does work in the television show.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's like realistically there should be, and we'll see it later in the Dominion War, more complex operations and maneuvers happening at that grand scale, to maneuver and position fleets such that, you know, those shaping operations, so that you don't get the enemy concentrating for a defense like this, because what you've done is
also I'm surprised he's not got it's going to sound strange again, considering the technology which the Federation has, especially with the Intrepids and the power they have, and I've seen your videos about the Intrepids, which were adapted with some various interesting freighter hulls for various reasons.
Yes.
Into AWACS freighters, AWACS Intrepids, and all these things, and, you know, Q-ship ideas. Well, the thing is, why have they not got, if they know the, let's put it this way, why have they not got ships going around pretending to be hundreds of cloaked Klingon ships?
Yeah.
Surely you can. Surely they can fake that signature with all the capabilities they've got, and things to try and draw the Dominion forces to split up, to break up.
Yes.
And, you know, they do have again, this is the point of it is written for TV. I do understand that, and but this is the point which sort of it is written up so perfectly that it's basically the arrival of the Klingons, which allows them to break through.
Which,
But it's a case of, and the Klingons doing what the Klingons do best: ambush attack into the middle of a melee. That's the Klingons going, woohoo, perfect battle scenario, and everyone else going, oh frigate, we gave them an opening. Who had this bright idea? You gave the Klingons this opening. But the point is, Starfleet should be able to do better. You know, again, with his fleet structure, and the thing is, it would have been more sensible is if he had these smaller ships, and by this point in the war, you would expect the Starfleet to have been churning out a huge number of smaller ships, which had crews of roughly 50 or so people, nothing big, and were just able to provide the numbers, the sheer mass, so they could chuck in. And yes, he has some fighters and some smaller ships, but they need a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, this is only actually 4 months into the war, by estimation. It's actually only about 4 months in, so can you produce that many ships in that time?
Starfleet have access to what are called as industrial replicators, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which are fairly massive in scale.
We don't exactly know how big they are, though. That's a whole
Judging
thing.
by the quantities they've suggested in the past, I would say, whilst probably not a Defiant-sized ship, your favourite ship, which I'm now completely forgotten the name of, like the Defiant smaller ship, the one you've done videos about them turning into a reserve organisation, having reservists. The
Valiant. The Valiant.
Yeah.
Valiant.
they've got things. They could have been producing. Maybe they can't produce a whole Valiant in one go in an industrial replicator, but they could produce the whole hull of the main source section and the other section, and then plonk it together and wire up. They could have been getting enough of those out quickly enough.
Yeah, I mean, my cap for the size of an industrial replicator is, I think industrial replicators. I have a theory that the reason we see the big scale jump from particularly motion picture era ships to TNG era ships, and critically we see a massive size jump in terms of warp nacelles. So warp nacelles take a huge jump. I'll get a picture for you, because it's massive. So my thinking is, okay, it's warp coils. That's what these industrial replicators are being used to do, is to build basically warp coils that you would have previously not been able to do.
But the thing is, they should have also the other option, which I think we've already mentioned in this video. I think we mentioned it before we even got here. Was they could have bought some from the Ferengi, some ships, because I'm sure the Ferengi have ships for sale, because the Ferengi are that sort of people. And yes, the warp nacelles do grow absolutely massive in comparison, and the ships themselves grow massive in comparison.
Yes, and so could you print out something the size of a Defiant? Probably not quite, but yeah, something Valiant size. You are getting quite close to at least being able to print out the hull in one, and then actually they're so small that you can probably build the warp coils the old-fashioned way. Because I think the reason they got into that was because they couldn't find enough of the thorium cortinide, which is what is used to make warp coils. They couldn't find enough of that in the state that they want, like the isotope, the version, the level of refinement that they want, in the quantities that they want. So you go to replicators to create this perfect material at scale.
That is the advantage of replicator units. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, again, it's you could. There is no reason why, with the technology they have, and yes, they would be having problems. Is that you'd have to call up a whole load of probably former Peter reservists, Marquis, anyone you can get hold of. When I say reservists, I mean probably people who served in Starfleet previously, etc. Go to a whole load of people who've retired from Starfleet and go, you're called back to the colours for the war. Which I'm never quite sure if Starfleet has a mechanism for or not.
Well, it's later shows definitely indicate it, and to answer that particular question, my answer to that was that they did do that, and then they all formed they formed with them the 7th Fleet and sent them to the Battle of Tyra. And that was that. Not to say that there aren't other reservists and reserve ships out there, but it was quite a harsh lesson for Starfleet.
It would not surprise me, because you need these ships, and if they'd been able to do that, considering the sheer amount of to produce an economy of the scale of Starfleet, which is described as a post-want society.
Yes.
You would need a lot of those things. And transitioning to total war would probably take a month for your economy, in terms of doing that. Transitioning all the ones you can to military production. And then you start churning these out. And again, by 4 months into the war, I'd expect you to have a few hundred to be able to back up this.
Yes. Whereas instead, of course, alls we have are fighters. Now, I don't have detailed pictures for the rest of the battle. I do however, have here a sample of what the fighter attacks looked like. I'm sure you can probably tell what the problem is with these fighter attacks. But
Yeah.
So what is the problem with these?
The fighters are holding formation like they are on a grid pattern. They're lining up to get killed.
In fairness, that's because I made these pictures and therefore I didn't want to maneuver like I didn't want to have to maneuver 50 things, but yeah.
I'm winding up a bit on that one, but the thing I would say is we're looking at the pictures and looking at the fighter positioning, etc., and how they're attacking them. They are kind of going a bit shallow. And they are kind of also, how do I put this politely? They're not using themselves to their strength. Why are you attacking such a small formation? Why, if you're concentrating your position, it's supposed to be concentrating your fire and concentrating your capabilities. I'd also say this was some of the Starfleet fighters and fight units, again, considering the various systems they have and the experience they have in shuttle design. The fact that fighters suddenly appear in this battle is always a fun one, because up until that point, people forget that Starfleet actually have fighters. But there again, Paris was a display team pilot, which display aircraft are often fighter aircraft of some kind, or adapted shuttles.
And he certainly didn't have an accident at the Academy involving Wesley Crusher. That's a completely different guy. Definitely not Tom Paris.
Yeah. We'll leave that to one side. They have an interesting history, but the thing is, when you start, looking at their fighter tactics and what they're aiming for, they're trying to ram themselves against the strongest points. And they're ramming themselves against, if you're doing these fighter attacks, if you're between two fleets, it's more akin to, why didn't the Royal Navy and the High Seas Fleet, the Ground Fleet and High Seas Fleet, in the middle of the Battle of Jutland, while they're firing and engaging each other, throw out their torpedo boats and destroyers into the middle of the fight to go and attack the other fleet? Because they get annihilated, because then they're going straight into the middle of the firing line between the things. And fighters in space are far closer to torpedo boats and destroyers in terms of World War I battles than they are to fighters in our modern understanding. Because the thing is, the ships...
They all occupy the same plane.
They all occupy the same plane, and the big ships you're dealing with can maneuver just as freely as you can in many ways. So what you're dealing with, and that scenario then will be a case of, well, okay, you should be attacking from multiple directions at once at the same target. You need to split up, and you're not going to be wanting to be in a dense group or a dense formation. You're going to want to be in many small groups, probably knowing the Federation, they'd be operating in pairs, but realistically they should sensibly be operating in fours, so they can provide mutual support. Or two sets of three, or two sets of two, but the Federation like pairs, so probably, let's say, 4 rather than 6. And they need to be covering from various planes to attack the same ship. They need to be focusing in, and they need to be trying to hit it probably aft its forward shields. Because in that kind of engagement, they're going to have their forward shields turned up to maximum to deal with the incoming fire from the fleet behind them. But there is the fact that Sisko is using them really as spoiling tactics to try and find a hole and try and draw the Cardassians off, which again works because he's playing the man, not the battle. But the thing is, realistically, what you should be doing is you should have these spoiling fighter attacks coming in, and then you should have your large number of what are those small ships again? You said them earlier again, and I forgot the name already again.
Valiants, but they wouldn't have anything like that. They just don't have them.
No, but they need to have something like the Valiants to go in behind them. And basically, basically the fighters are coming in, the Valiants are coming in, and then you need to have behind that the cruisers coming in.
Yes,
And
I
so
mean that was
so that they're basically going, okay, so you get this, you're dealing with the fighters, and then you've got the Valiants to deal with, and you've got to choose: do I engage the fighters, which are annoying but pressing, but the Valiants will cause me more trouble, and behind the Valiants are the cruisers, or do I engage? You know, what you need to make it into a scenario where they are whole force engaged, and they are trying to deal with what the situation is. And yes, there are also the Dominion ships as well interspersed, and various things, groups interspersed together, which is interesting to me, because that suggests that you've managed to do some cross-training between Dominion and Cardassian forces to actually work together and insulate each other's fire, which was not something we really saw going on, considering their approaches to each other, the two groups.
It's not something I imagine, like, in that sort of upper graphic. I sort of think the extent of it probably goes almost Napoleonic style. The Cardassians are actually sandwiched between Dominion forces, so that, you know, almost so to sort of, you know, stiffen them up a little bit, you know, keep them in line, keep them in order.
Well, you have to remember, this was still in the period where Cardassia was still a favoured ally, and where Gul Dukat was aligning up the battle formations. So he'd have probably imagined it was more that the Cardassians were stiffening the Dominions up.
Yeah, because again, the Dominion, the Dominion. This is a battle where Dukat, he wants it to happen, and he needs to stand. And he has seen that the Dominion, they can be very fluidic. They can, if they don't like the odds, they will happily run away and come back later. They won't slug it out if they don't think they have to.
Well, as we talked about in previous videos, they don't really have the mass to slug it out, because they don't have the ships to slug it out. You know, they have great light ships, and they have these very powerful big ships. They don't have the middle row ships you need to slug it out. They are basically a first and fifth rate navy. They have these wonderful first rates, and they have these wonderful fifth rates. But they have no second, third, or fourth rates, and really they need a decent third rate to be their solid force.
If I was to say anything with regards to the fighters and the choice of sending in fighters in waves, it could be that Sisko was anticipating that the Cardassians would have been bringing their own fighters. In this particular instance, there were no Dominion carriers, Cardassian carriers, which they had. Let me get a picture for you. So it did mean that they had free reign, and the only thing that was threatening them was the small attack ships, the Hidekis and the bug ships. As you pointed out, the problem I see with it is that where are the destroyers? This would be so much more dangerous if you were following in with Sabres, Defiance, Mirandas.
Mirandas are light cruisers. But yeah,
I mean,
but the trouble is, again, at this point, the main thing that Starfleet's going for is activating everything from their storage garage.
Yes,
that's majorly what they're doing. They're going through their old ships and going, "Oh, can we activate you?" That's the Starfleet strategic depth. But yeah, I think the moment you see there are no carriers, that's when you start to change your plans. Once you see there are no Cardassian carriers, and they were interesting vessels, and yeah, that picture has not improved my opinion of them at all.
So you have these fighter attacks, and eventually, of course, it succeeds in achieving what Sisko wanted, and this is basically because Dukat is now willing to spring his trap. So what happens is he basically says to the escort units, go after them. And of course this opens a hole specifically for those smaller Starfleet ships like, you know, destroyers, Miranda, Defiant, Sabre. You know, they can then drive that wedge, and I think there is validity to using the Defiant, even though it's Sisko's command ship. That's a separate problem. But in and of itself, using the Defiant and other small ships to exploit the gap.
It's very good you said that's a separate problem there, because in nice way, at this point, Sisko is still a captain as far as I'm concerned, and he's just theoretically his admiral's chief of staff / senior advisor, whatever. And B, he's on a separate ship to the admiral when the chief of staff should be with their admiral, and he's acting as almost a fleet commander or force commander executing the plan. And he's not an admiral, and this is multiple admirals, multiple fleets which are commanded by multiple admirals, and apparently they're being ordered around by a captain.
Yeah.
And he's on a ship which has no extra staff for him to do this.
I would like to imagine that, like I say, the Admiral Ross is kind of way at the back in, an ambassador class or something, just actually running things, and that Sisko is effectively like the Vanguard commander.
Yes, I'd like to imagine that as well, because that would make things a whole lot better.
Yeah, and it's his plan, and it's ultimately up to him to spot the opportunity, to spot the chance, and then Ross can then say, okay, right, we're doing this, so this is how we move.
In nicest way, that then makes it better, because Ross then stays there fighting the battle and continuing to fight the battle, so that the Cardassian Dominion Alliance forces can't turn their back on and run back to secure the Deep Space Nine.
Yeah,
but
turn around and pursue.
Dukat was never planning on doing that, because he thought DS9 was going to be strong enough to stop it.
Yes, and he thought that the Federation fleet was going to be completely crushed.
Yeah. Look,
as you go on.
One of the problems I see here is you are, to an extent, right, but the things that you open up holes with, you drive into wedges. If you're talking about a land battle, you'd be driving an armored division, and one of the in terms of Soviet doctrine, it was one of their large shock armies or guards armies, a shock army or guards army, something with enough punch that once it's punched into the rear of the NATO formations, it can cause a lot of trouble. When you're talking about a fleet battle like this, the closest you've really got is Aegis sail. Realistically, in terms of lining up and engaging and wanting to punch through. In which case, the ships you punch through at the front of the line at Battle of Trafalgar and these things are your first rates. Because they are the ships which are designed to take the biggest punches and keep on rolling, and to give the biggest punches. So the thing is, the Defiant is actually the wrong ship to be punching a hole through with. She's the right ship to charge on afterwards, but realistically, she should be punching a hole through behind about 3 or 4 Galaxy class. In full battleship mode.
Yeah,
basically bringing Armageddon to anything that gets in their way. And unleashing so many photon torpedoes that people are seeing the rainbow.
Taste the rainbow.
That is what she should be punching a hole through behind. Because that is what punches a hole through enemy formations. Your biggest, largest, meanest ship possible. Defiant is mean, yes. But she's not got the fire. She needs to. You need to be talking a scale. It's And now I've forgotten the name of the class, which I'm having a real bad this evening remembering class names. But the class which splits in 3 in its attack pattern.
Prometheus.
Yes. You need about 4 of those at the front, along with 4 Galaxy class. That is the sort of thing you should be having punching that hole. A force basically, anything which is sitting there is going to go, oh, I'm a Dominion battleship. Okay, I'm now in Vienna, because I've gone night-night.
Yeah. Equally, we do in the episode have the dialogue, and we do see here in this picture, you can actually see, I think, 3 Galaxy... He says Galaxy Wing... He orders the Galaxy Wing into the gap. He does order in the Galaxy Wing as well. So almost
Defiant
like they're
shouldn't
there
be in
to...
front of those, because the Defiant's job is to burst through the back after them. They should be clearing the path for the Defiant, so he should be hanging back behind them.
Yes, it's like I'm going to, forgive me everyone, I'm going to make an equivalent to rugby. So in rugby, for me personally, as someone who is not massive, but who hangs around with the big guys, my job is not to take the ball in necessarily. Their job is to, they'll be the first ones to get the ball, and then they're massive big guys going at some clip. So probably the opposition is going to allocate like 2 people to actually bring them down. That happens, they can then pop the ball to me, and I go through. Is it that kind of concept?
Speaking as a prop forward, I was one of the big guys in rugby. My record is taking 4 guys onto me, then passing the ball while I've taken 4 of the enemy out with me. And they are on the ground with me, not to be able to get up that quickly because I am having many accidents on the floor trying to get up whilst they're, this is sufficiently distracted. And that's literally the concept. He is the flanker. Yes. He's in the fight. It's got punch, but he should be behind. You've got ambassadors, you've got Mirandas, you've got, galaxies. These are the punch vessels that should be punching through hard. He should be nowhere near the front. There shouldn't be another thing of, oh, look at him doing those cool maneuvers. By the time he gets level with the Dominion ships, they should be wreckage.
Yes. And I can be as agile as I want. If I get the ball and things haven't been shaped for me, I could be running into a big guy.
It should have been, hello, we are your resident galaxy battleship. We are here to service you today. How would you like to be destroyed? And until they run into something of equivalent firepower.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's oh goody, I have a fellow to have a scrummage with.
Yeah, yeah, scrum time. Yeah, and it's basically like with the Galaxy class, because it's got that 10-round torpedo launcher. So critically, what it's going to have is, even if it has a slow reload to get it back up to 10 shots, like 10 seconds. And so like in the midst of a battle, you want to be just putting out photon torpedoes at a constant rate. Even if you are going to do that, it's still worth having that initial 10 photon torpedoes to just go bang, to just get that initial shock of fire onto the enemy.
And if it does really take you 10 seconds to load, you're still going to be able to fire 60 a minute.
Yeah.
Really, that, in nicest way, that battle scene, and I do remember that scene from, looking over the galaxies, looking at the ships, should have been just look like a star field because of the sheer amount of photons that should have been racing across.
Yes! Yeah.
It should have been the Dominion and the Cardassians looking at going, oh my god, they've, as I said earlier, unleashed the rainbow on us. Every colour of photon torpedo and anything else ever imagined possible. And, you sit there and you look at it and go, Starfleet has this technology, they have this capability. And whilst, yes, they don't produce warships, by the time you're 4 months into a war, considering the engineering crews and science teams they have aboard their own ships, I am honestly quite depressed by how little modification and self-modification those ships seem to have had.
Mm-hmm. There haven't been any Captain Drakinophels.
Well, not just Captain Drakinophel, as much as I love Drak, and I do consider that appropriate for him, the fact is the average Royal Navy destroyer in World War II, especially some of the ones working around in the Mediterranean, were sporting at least 2 or 3 captured Italian guns at some points, which they'd managed to liberate from the army stocks of captured Italian army material. It was just a thing of, oh, we found extra weapons, let's put them on.
Yeah.
And, someone like Captain Drak, in a nice way, his ship, you'd be looking at his ship going, is that a Galaxy class? I have no idea what it is now. And
Yeah.
Where did they get a phase cannon that big? I thought PH-7s couldn't be fitted on ships.
Yeah.
That's a planet-killing system. Where did he get that from?
Accidentally builds the World Razor, or
Yeah,
invents the Galaxy X like 20 years early.
well, this is the thing. You've got people like Janeway wandering around at this time.
Yeah.
And nice way, you think about Geordie LaForge, you think about all those great Starfleet engineers, you think about how LaForge, even in minor ways in peacetime, while he was voyaging around, was adapting the Enterprise. And yet you're going to tell me that in the middle of a war, where their ability to fight is literally their chance of survival, when they've been dealing with the Cardassians not that long ago, and they've had problems with the Klingons, and all that, you're going to tell me that none of Starfleet's engineers and captains have been looking at their ships and going, do you think we can do something about our number of phasers, or the amount of capacitors we have, or, do you think we could maybe load it so we have 10 ready to go, so we can fire 2 salvos of 10 torpedoes? Can we maybe modify it? Because let's be honest, the Galaxy class isn't short on space.
No, it is not. I mean, that on the note of modifications, I would just suggest that there is one ship that it does kind of suggest maybe it was happening. That being the USS Centaur, because that is covered in various greebles.
Yes, she is.
So, and specifically for the job it's doing of being a sort of very aggressive patrol cruiser.
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing you would expect a captain of that to do.
But the thing is, I do realise, again, this is partially to do with the television programme, partially to it being easier for the people who are mod designing this, who keep basically similar ships, and we all know that the producers of Star Trek can fall into this trap, because after all, there was that battle scene that shall not be named from a more recent version of Star Trek, where they literally did copy and paste with the same ship over and over again.
Yes.
So we cannot necessarily blame them, but it just seems to me, in this scenario, with all of what Starfleet has and the capacity they have and the capabilities they have, I am surprised. To be fair, I'm also surprised that every one of those galaxies going forward isn't also disgorging about a dozen or so extra fighters, which have suddenly appearing, so they have fighter escorts going into the fight, because that would cause the Dominion to have real trouble with their small ships. Because that's the answer to the galaxy's problems with dealing with small ships, having a whole load of fighters around you. And you have the fighter waves which gun in from your carriers, but I've had fighters aboard the galaxies and the other ships ready to go, so the moment they're going forward, the fighters pop out and they guarantee have fighter escort with them, because they've literally brought it with them.
Yes, and now you have this angry cloud of attack craft, which can either shield the galaxy from, because your average Jem'Hadar fighter versus a attack ship, versus a small Peregrine fighter. Yeah, it's not much of a competition, as you can see in like those pictures a bit further up. Like obviously those are Hidekis, but it's but when there's a lot of them, and when your choice is taking the time to engage that fighter or trying to get shots on the Galaxy class, bearing in mind the thing that you don't attack, that you don't engage, will be engaging you, and then you're put in a bad position.
And the more important thing is to remember that every one of those fighter pilots will have heard the story of what happened to the first Galaxy class that met the Dominion, and will know that if they don't do the job, then their home gets blown up, and all their friends.
Yes.
And suddenly those become some very motivated fighter pilots, who are going to do exactly what they need to do.
So effectively you can see that there's a full engagement from the first line of Dominion ships, while the second line is sort of holding back and allowing them to just commit themselves fully.
And again, in a sensible battle scenario, those two halves of the fleet would actually split up, go round, and engage Starfleet from behind.
Yes, and my suspicion is that was obviously what was planning. I mean, what we can see if we now go back to the episode, you've got picture here of the Defiant bursting through, and the only other ships I can see in shot are an Excelsior and SeaTac and Majestic, and that's what Defiant has for buddies is two Mirandas, which aren't ideal pairings with the Defiant.
True. I know I keep going back to this, but this is where this is the point. Is you as I said earlier, you're a flanker, I'm a prop. In the nicest way, this is the scenario where the props are doing the work.
Yes.
And instead, what you have is, in the nicest way, a flanker, a hooker, and a fly half.
Yeah.
If you don't play rugby and you're listening to this,
that sounded very rude.
Idea. It does sound rude, but basically, the hooker is the really light. If you ever see a scrum in rugby, there usually you will see at the front row there are two big guys, and then there'll be this smaller person, or if they're girls playing, it'll be two big girls and a smaller girl. The smaller person in the middle is called a hooker, and they are literally held up in the air by the two big people on either side, and their job is to try and hook the ball that's in the scrum with their foot and pull it in. They are literally chosen because they are light and mean. But, this is the thing with this scene. You've got these ships they are lovely ships. But they're not the ones which should be there. They should be the row behind the galaxies.
Yes. And so what you can see sort of happening is, like, they're driving in with these smaller ships, and they're getting progressively more and more isolated.
Yeah. Because the hull won't be wide enough.
Yeah. And so, it does seem that basically it is SeaTac and Majestic, and that's it. And that is the Defiant support. And of course, in short order, we then see both of them get taken out, and it is just the Defiant on its own. So you've got what hits. It looks like
great cinematography for the Defiant and setting it up as the hero ship. It's great for that. But it also means that at that point, if someone takes out the Defiant, you've lost the battle. And also, considering the importance of Sisko, who is basically a one-man staff for Admiral Ross, who's commanding this war, surely he deserves a better bodyguard than just
two Mirandas. Yeah. Maybe sabers. I don't know. I will say in this picture you can actually see a few peregrine fighters that seem to just be on the loose. So that's something.
Yeah, it's nice to have a couple of peregrines along. What you need is about a wing or two of them at this point. But again, this is one of the reasons why you have, you hold back waves, and a wave goes in with this wave, and you have, as I said, you needed the galaxies, and they have their own fighters with them, and all these sort of things. So you could. The point about Starfleet versus the Dominion is the advantage they have is they're the home court advantage, and they needed to start maxing it out. And let's be honest, the Cardassians, after the trouble they'd been through, didn't exactly have an endless supply of people either. And whilst the Federation are recruiting and do face interesting shortfalls in terms of their recruitment numbers, in the first 4 months of the war, they are basically still dealing with the initial war outrage that someone's come and done this, which is helping them. They are not quite at the level of war weariness. It's starting to begin, but it's not quite dead. It's causing trouble yet. They have the recruits coming in. They are still able to make use of all the former service personnel who they are recruiting. And they've also can start getting the various marquee and others involved. This should be at one point almost a high point for them in numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean,
And
I think for the first year of the war, it will be. They will expand later on, just as scale goes up.
Well, I agree, but you see, it would have made. It's again the thing with Sisko is realistically in this battle he should have been in a sovereign, not a defiant.
Yes.
Because if you're going to punch through, realistically, the force behind the galaxies coming through and trying to punch through should have been sovereigns, which have almost so much firepower but have that speed and agility. So the moment the hole's been punched by the galaxies and they're making the right hole, then the sovereigns go through, and you're not going to catch them. The amount of damage they're going to cause. But realistically, it should be like 4 sovereigns and 4 defiants pulsing through as fast and hard as they can go.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm looking at from what I can see of the various shots in the previous episode where we get a very clear look at the fleet, I can see at least 5 galaxy classes. And again, that's probably also the wings of the various galaxy wings of different fleets being amalgamated together for that force.
Yeah, it's one of those things of you start looking at this battle again. I can understand the difficulty of the writers in this scenario because and it's also its cost, etc., bringing the various media together and all these things. I can understand that, but when you've got a battle on this scale, this importance, you do it. These are the sort of ships you call in. And nice to say, it would be kind of like the Royal Navy trying to fight the Battle of Matapan and going, you know what, we're not going to bring Warspite.
Yeah.
We're not going to bring Warspite.
That's actually very good. That's actually very good.
We're going to leave our best battleship in this area behind, the faster battleship, because the others are better at pounding battles, and we're going to leave that one behind. And you just don't do that.
Yeah, you pull out all the stops. You throw.
This is going to be a critical battle because if you control the wormhole, you control the access between the Dominion forces. You split it, and you're cutting them off from the. It's the pivotal point of the war.
Yes.
You don't.
But then, if
you don't leave stuff on the shelf because whilst you look, there is the whole point of if we lose, then we're going to be in real trouble. But the thing is, if you lose this battle, you could end up losing the war. Because they're going to be able to get reinforcements in.
And it's going to be a lot.
So your only chance, realistically, is either if you lose, you're lost. So your only chance is to win this battle.
Yeah.
So you send everything. You send the kitchen sink if it'll fly.
I think the argument would be that Starfleet Admiral, who we previously ranted about, and he would probably say, I won't budge on this issue. Won't somebody please think of the children?
Yeah, it's not children in their things. Sitting going,
will somebody think of us?
Yeah, nicest way, but if you lose this battle, you're going to lose the whole war because they just keep pumping out resources and they'll have an entire galaxy to supply them and one entire quadrant to supply them and you won't. And in nicest way, you're going to lose that. Yeah. You will lose that fight, that war.
But if you wanted an explanation as to why the Sovereign wasn't at this battle, that would be my suggestion, was that effectively a political concession.
Yeah, but this is the problem we're seeing in Starfleet, is that half the time in these early battles they are being hamstrung by the logical answer is the politics. Mm-hmm. The logical answer is the politics.
Yes, this picture here, because again we see the progression. Oops. you can then see that one of the Mirandas gets taken out, and you can already see swinging into the back of the frame, one Jem'Hadar battlecruiser has realized what's going on, and is like, I'm gonna put a stop to this.
It's doing the sensible thing.
Yeah. And yeah, literally in the next frame, torpedoes the other Miranda, and then it is Defiant on its own. There is a Jem'Hadar battlecruiser after it now. Because and you can argue, yeah, it's because there wasn't enough there weren't enough forces to tie the Dominion down. So you then see the Defiant on its own. It's being chased by 3 Jem'Hadar attack ships. I'm not sure where the Defiant has gone. I'm not sure where the Jem'Hadar battlecruiser has gone. Maybe it lagged behind or found something else to kill. But what you can see in the back of this shot is the mythical Wandering Galaxy class.
Wandering around doing something.
Yeah, well, it's like it's further ahead in the fleet than Defiant. It's further ahead than Defiant, and it's turning back.
Yeah. Again, this is more American football style in that the offensive linesman has gone through the entire other team's line and is now going, where the frig? They're all behind me. Okay, I'm coming back to get you.
Yeah.
But the thing is, again, that should have been a pack of galaxies, and by the time the Defiant's going through, there should be pretty much mostly, how do I put this politely? Scrap iron and bad memories.
Yeah. Yes.
I would say Star Trek universe has needed the books and the computer games to round out the forces over the years, because I do find the limitations of the TV budget mean that you end up with very imbalanced forces versus what they need. It's like that was I think it was the discussion I was having with you about how somehow we are expected to believe again in an episode which we shall not discuss, of a more recent version of Star Trek, that the entire Starfleet is roughly a few hundred ships appearing in one place. And you sit there and go, there is no concept, there is no chance it could be that. Because that would be, in a nice way, unless the Federation had shrunk dramatically.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and also, like, particularly for me with the Cardassians, I'm fine with letting the Dominion literally be those 2 classes of ships, because I think that to an extent makes sense for what they are. But for the Cardassians, it's like using video games to fill in with things like the Lakat, the Rysalak, basically everything in between Hideki and Galore. You have a nice linear progression from light destroyer to full on proper destroyers to frigates to light cruisers and everything else.
Yeah, and I would say the thing is, again, as we've discussed this again, I'm not sure if it's recorded in a video we discussed it or we've just our discussion. This is the thing we have
general
our discussion. But the thing about the Dominion fleets is it makes sense for them to have the missing middle, because it allows, especially their allies, to underestimate them.
Yes, yeah. Which, comes into play later on.
Yeah, and also it becomes, because their thing is, to them, their forces, to an extent, the clone forces are essentially expendable. And so they are prepared to do things with them, which no one else is going to do, which means you don't necessarily need the same same sort of mixture and gradient of ships.
But yeah, of course, so we have then the Defiant being chased down by three Jem'Hadar fighters. It looks like this is it. And then, of course, the Klingons come to save the day. Interestingly, in this particular frame, you can see, again, a roving galaxy class, but you also have a Steamrunner and two Akiras back here. So obviously, the bigger, tougher, there does seem to be a correlation between the ships that are getting through to this point. And then we have a sort of a visualization here of just effectively where the Klingons come in and where they have hit. Essentially driving, again, a second wedge into the enemy force, but one that they're not actually expecting. So they're basically cutting off the supports, the reserves, from the main Dominion force that is engaging the main Federation force. Obviously, Defiant is like somewhere getting towards the end of the formation at this point.
Yeah. And at this point, of course, it's, once the Klingons arrive and smashing into the back, it's a case of, we've got a problem now.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of problems. Because what do you do with your three remaining fleets which aren't engaged?
Mm-hmm.
And especially because, as said earlier, for the Klingons, this is their dream fight.
Yes.
You've got a close quarters brawling fight where your senses are going to be mucked up anyway, and you've now got an opponent which likes to, as part of their doctrine, cloak and uncloak.
Mm-hmm.
It's not good. And plus, let's be honest as well, the Klingons do have some very heavy hitters. But one of the things I do notice in this scene is there's suddenly a lot more Starfleet ships in the picture when they're coming in.
Yes. Yeah. It's not a... Because it was shot as multiple separate animations, the geography of the battle is very wonky. Because at times it looks like Defiant is out on its own, really deep behind enemy lines, and then, cut to the next shot. Oh, there's all these other ships around.
To an extent, the Klingons are coming in like cavalry, and they are, of course, the cavalry. That's the symbolic filling in the sort of the movie in the episode. Yeah. They're coming in like the cavalry over the hill. And they are going to to unbalance the situation for their opponents.
Mm-hmm.
And to an extent, again, what you should be seeing is, to an extent, is the Klingons basically. It's going to sound strange, but they've got to do two things. Two of their fleets need to smash into the aft line and keep those three fleets busy, the Dominion and the Klingon, Dominion Cardassian fleets on the map. And one of their fleets needs to smash into probably the Dominion fleet closest to them.
Yeah.
And the reason they need to smash into the Dominion fleet closest to them is if they break that, the Dominion forces are more likely to withdraw. Because the Dominion our forces are more that way inclined than the Cardassians.
Yes, so
and
I think
you can see punch the hole through.
What happens in this next picture there? So I think it's subtle, but there is some movement here. So effectively, you can see the central Cardassian fleet that I think was probably the one that was singled out for all those fighter attacks and everything. That was basically getting softened up by Sisko, and that was the thing that they were honing in on. That one then gets driven back. There is almost a risk, you can see at the top, a risk of a collapse of the flank. That top Federation fleet has got basically 2-on-1, but everywhere else, there are actually 2-on-1s in favor of the Allies. So you've got a Federation fleet on one side of this red Cardassian fleet, and then you've got one of the Klingons. And then a similar thing with the Jem'Hadar fleet that's actually pinned between 3 of them. And then you've got the other 2 Klingon fleets that are basically forming essentially a new line. That's almost like they've cutting off the first wave, the first line of Dominion ships, and isolating them from their supports.
And it also, it's going to sound strange, but it's also putting them in a situation where they have a conundrum with their tactics. Because the tactics they use to fight the Federation are not going to be the tactics they use to fight the Klingons.
No. They're very, very different.
And now they're in a scenario where the Klingons are, well, for the forces behind that are trapped between the 2 formations,
what do you do?
They're dead.
Yeah.
Their only chance is to bug out as fast as they can. Because of the situation they're in. Because if they set themselves up to fight the Federation to one side, then the Klingons behind them are going to massacre them. If they set themselves up to fight the Klingons, the Federation behind them are going to massacre them. There's just no way. Yeah. So basically, they need to bug out and maybe pull back and reform behind the rest of the fleet. But the thing that's the more interesting to me is the fact that the 2 fleets on the flank are, on the back line flank that were unengaged. As we saw in the picture in the TV in the show, didn't move, and this is again command. This is a command structure issue. They've been told to hold the line. They're not going to adapt, and this is the greatest advantage Federation and Klingon really have against the Dominion and the Cardassians. Both of them have a very strong command structure. Culture where unless they're given orders by their superiors to move, they're going to follow their last orders until they're given new orders.
Yeah. And, Gul Dukat doesn't really react very well.
Because his beautiful plan has just been mucked up.
Yes. It has, in fact, it has survived first contact with the enemy, it's just not survived second contact. All they would actually have to do, it'd be really simple. They can certainly see it from where they are. They would just see that there's that, like I say, that dark blue Federation fleet that's already facing a 2-on-1. Just throw your weight behind that. And you'll collapse the flank.
Well, they could literally roll themselves in behind. They could go round and go in behind and go, hello, we're here. And roll up the Federation line quite quickly.
Yeah. And then suddenly, turn things on them. So then we see effectively further progressions, things sort of tight. Well, at that point, things do, but I think this is basically not because at this point it's worth saying that Defiant is gone at this point in the battle. This is just me covering what happens afterwards. So they do enter the battle, but I think it is very much because the battle has come to them rather than and as you can see, basically that first Dominion line, either it's been deformed and driven back, so you've got there's basically a big hole where that central Cardassian fleet was effectively routed, and then everyone else is now isolated. So again, you've got that Cardassian fleet in the red. He's getting in trouble. The Jem'Hadar, and again because you've got those Klingons almost forming that new wedge.
Yeah, and what they've done is that blue fleet still holds on, and that's just always amazing to me. That blue, I'm not sure what that dark blue fleet is composed of, but it's just sitting there going, yeah, I'm just rocking. It's 2-on-1 and I'm rocking.
I mean, I could definitely imagine it would actually be like ambassadors or ambassadors and Narendras, like not stuff that you necessarily would want to throw into that main charge, that main punch, but stuff that can pin things down. Because yeah, all things like it depends how much like because this does just look like chaos, but I think there was a plan of some sort behind it. Like was Cisco he always knew that he was going to have to do a kind of a breakthrough, so he always knew that he was going to need something to basically lock the flanks down. Again, steam runners actually are quite a good option for that, because while they are small, that means that they're maneuverable, and they're also at the same time they can hang in a fight for a really long time.
And they need that. They need that at this point. They need to be holding them. But again, this plan. You know, there's part of me that actually sympathises with those admirals from earlier, because whilst I do think they were stupid in not supplying enough forces and worrying about Earth, when you look at this plan being executed, this is a good way to get your forces surrounded.
Yes, and you can very easily see how that could have happened.
Yes, that is. And the fact is, part of that is because they bring so few forces with them, but also because, in a nicest way, if any force needed to be stiffened by sovereigns and various other things, it was the flanking forces of this formation, this fleet.
Yes,
You need this. You need this. You need that dark blue Federation fleet and the dark green, the light green, the really bright green, to be some of the strongest, what I would call holding fleets you have ever got. If your plan is to punch through in the middle, then you need those two fleets to be designed to be absolute units. But with this battle at this point, and realistically with this battle at this point, you have to also, to an extent, criticise the Klingons. Because they could attack from any angles they wanted, right? They're cloaked.
Yeah. Why didn't they go all the way to the rear?
Yes, and attack literally in line with the rear. Literally in line, the same line, so they can divide the Dominion forces into Dominion and Cardassian forces in two. Because if they'd hit at the from the back at the same angle towards where the Federation ships were trying to punch through, you break that formation, you break that fleet.
Yeah, I mean, the
while
Klingons
while they're responding to that, the Klingons, they're cloaked. They've cloaked well enough. They've managed to hide their approach well enough that when they charge in out of that angle, they are hitting that close. It's not going that much further out their way to angle in, so they're hitting from the other side towards that position, because they are hitting towards the same point as the Federation are trying to punch through. They are. But they're almost sort of the wrong side of the formations.
Yeah, I mean, the argument could be that they didn't want to do that because they wanted to actually be relatively close to the Federation fleet, because, again, it is actually only 3 Klingon fleets. So if the Dominion are quick on their reaction, they can actually basically fight 2 separate battles and basically kettle the Klingons while they deal with the Federation, or vice versa. So I wonder if the Klingons' first priority was just link up with the Federation.
Yeah. Possibly.
And yeah, like push as a united front rather than two separate fronts.
Yeah, there is that definitely as a likelihood, but it's yeah. I'm just sitting there and looking at it and thinking about this. It's a little bit of a missed opportunity, but it does also fit with Martok, who likes to go straight for the enemy's jugular as quickly as he can.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
It does,
and it
fit
would
with
be
him.
like
It does fit with his
yes.
idea and his policy.
If he went for the rear, he'd have to take more time to get around the side, and again, that could be time in which things change and the Federation is just broken. Because while you're under cloak, obviously it's a big battle. It's not like Cloak is, but when you're under Cloak, you don't 100% know exactly what is going on. And in fairness, in a battle like this, you're not going to know 100% of what is going on anyway. But that then probably goes doubly when you're cloaked.
Yes. It does, but it's a case of... Yeah, it's this battle is it's not the most well written battle in the history of Starfleet.
No, not by any means. But as you can see, so what then happens is essentially, because of the Klingons coming through on the from the bottom, you've got 3 Dominion fleets which basically are now just isolated, don't really know what they're doing, like the battle's kind of left them behind. You've then got that sort of purple Cardassian fleet that's now getting basically ganked by 2 Klingon fleets. You have a Federation fleet, which is now that blue fleet just opening, the light blue fleet just opening that gap.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll then see in the next frame that essentially they then just start pouring through. At that point, the Dominion fleet is completely divided, and disrupted, and then of course things are now very much going wrong at Deep Space Nine. So
and once you have divided fleet and they're not receiving messages from their senior command, in this scenario they are in trouble.
Yeah,
they are in trouble. But it's also, it's an interesting scenario for them all.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. Because this is the point at which you need some fluidity in your command for both sides.
Yes.
And Federation have that more. The Klingons have that in droves.
Mm-hmm.
But realistically, if you're looking at it from the perspective of the Dominion forces, their fleets, they've got 4 which are cut off,
mm-hmm.
which are realistically one group of 3, and a single one which is somehow managing to find itself nestled in between 4 Federation fleets and a Klingon fleet. A lovely position for it to be in. That's a Dominion fleet. And then they've got a nice 8 fleets up top.
Yeah. Like, you actually still have a fight.
At this point, they have advantage because they are both sides of the Federation. The Federation is to an extent split in three. The Federation Klingon allies are to an extent split in 3 almost, with their pivot point being the green Starfleet formation, which is just not a good position to be in.
No. But again, because of... So yeah, I mean, they have a fightable fleet. Like, and especially, this is the thing, when you're dealing with a battle on this scale, where it's like, effectively nearly 2,000 ships aside, when you're dealing with a battle of this kind of scale, the thing is that you're not going to actually, in the course of the battle, you're unlikely to inflict enough damage, enough losses to actually. It's not. You're not going to win by attrition. You're not going to win by destroying a sufficient number of enemy ships, because there's just so many in play. And it's very easy for them to disappear into the crowd, to go and repair their shields and rearm and everything, and then get back in the fight when they're ready. So it becomes much more about positioning.
That's often the way with these things. It becomes, without whatever you want to say, it becomes about not just positioning, but also the adaptability of the positioning, how the fleet is prepared to fight, how the fleet is prepared to be organised, how the fleet is prepared to work itself through in this sort of scenario. And yeah, it's a tough time for them in some regards. It is a tough time for them. But again, Federation have the advantage. But the thing is, Federation have the advantage of leadership. They don't necessarily have the ships to actually be doing this. This is one of the things problems I have with this battle in some regards, is that I'm sitting there looking at it going, yeah, but the thing is, they don't have the depth of ship numbers. They don't have the force structure to really exploit it. They have the adaptability of command, but they don't have the force structure to exploit it. Where are their small ships? Where are their large? Where are the ships that you can basically use as skirmishers to wall off your manoeuvres and give you some hope to hold these lines? And they don't have these ships there.
No. Or certainly not in large numbers.
The Klingons arrive, because the Klingons then bring them in large numbers. Because the Klingons have their birds of prey.
Yes.
Which are them in large numbers. Very large numbers.
Yes, and they have birds of prey in everything. Every formation has birds of prey in support.
Yeah.
And again, it's as you said, it's that sort of thing of when you have a galaxy supported by fighters, you create a dilemma for your enemy, because it's like, do I deal with the bird of prey and risk getting blown up by the Vocher in one shot, or do I ignore the bird of prey, attack the Vocher, and then I get chipped away at by a squadron of birds of prey? Essentially, it is at this point that I suspect what basically happens is they start, messaging Deep Space Nine for orders, and then Dukat's having... Yeah, Dukat's having his significant emotional event.
And of course, Dukat doesn't exactly have a proper functioning staff either to start helping him or second in command, or people there who are taking over things and sorting things out.
No, he has Damar. He has a Damar.
Yeah, Damar.
And maybe Weyoun, who possibly could help, but I don't think wants to.
Weyoun is the most interesting, weird character you're ever going to deal with.
Yes, because he is more of a political animal than a military commander, or he's more strategically minded than he is tactically. However, how much of it is needed to just have a cool head, say, okay, how many Federation ships have broken through? Because realistically, you can in this last picture, you can see that effectively you've got 3 fleets that are now heading towards the station, while the rest are still actually engaging with the Dominion. And so what it would actually be is somebody say, right, okay, how many Allied fleets got through? Okay, break off these 3, because they're not doing very much. They can go after them. Meanwhile, the rest of you withdraw a bit, get a bit of distance, and then reform here.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily need a military genius. It just needs
But the
someone
trouble
who
is,
is.
withdrawal from engagement is one of the most difficult maneuvers you can do, and requires your forces are both very tightly controlled and also very willing to do their own independent judgment and assessment of how you pull back. And
Yes.
realistically, actually, if you were being really naughty, what you do instead is you bring your fleets together and you squish the ones in the middle. But if you're defending DS9, you need to pull back now, and hard,
Yeah. Yeah.
to reform
Yeah.
the
You need
line
to.
and regroup your ships.
Yes. Yes. And that's the thing. I mean, theoretically, I mean, obviously, there's benefit in defense in depth, but theoretically, do you think the Dominion would have been better off fighting the battle actually at DS9, being able to use it as a fortification and a strong point?
I would have fought the battle closer to DS9 because there's no point. That's where they want to engage, and also in a nicest way. That always gives you the option of causing trouble to Bajor, which is going to distract the Federation. And I don't, as Dominion or Cardassians, I don't care about that, realistically.
Yep. Yes, yes. I mean, you've done it for the politics, but yes, if you're the Dominion, you might hesitate. But the thing is that, yeah, as you say, this is the battle to decide the war. And yes, hitherto during the war, the Dominion has been on best behavior. Why are you fighting us? We're not so bad. You know,
we want to bring peace and harmony to everyone.
Yeah. And so, to an extent, yeah, they're not going to just burn that reputation. But this is to an extent the immediate win or lose for the Dominion.
Yeah. So they, in nicest way, honestly, again, fighting this closer to DS9 makes sense from many other perspectives as well, because then you have DS9 to support you, but also you can support DS9, and it means that the enemy can't get past you. They have to fight through you.
Yeah.
They can't do this.
I suspect the reason Gul Dukat didn't go for that, it might have been a number of reasons, but I think it's because he wanted to win that sort of, that field battle.
And also, he didn't want the victory to be in any way being able to be said it was the Dominion's victory, because their reinforcements come through the wormhole and crush the enemy.
Yes, ultimately, if you fight the battle at Deep Space Nine, I mean, potentially, you might not pull all that many ships back in order to do it. You might pull fewer back because, of course, you've got DS9 backing you up. So instead of going with 12 fleets, you end up with, say, 8 plus Deep Space Nine.
You're making this is a battle to decide the fate of the war. You pull everything back. You win this in the nicest way. Any territory you lose gets retaken very quickly by those extra Dominion ship fleets coming through.
Yep.
It's what, 60 fleets?
It's how many? If it's if it's 6,000 ships, it would be 60 fleets. That's not messing around. And if you want to use Star Trek Online, to an extent, there's more specialist craft in that fleet as well. I mean, I certainly think that there were probably Gamma Quadrant built Dominion battleships in there, and that would have meant that they would have had Dominion battleships by sort of, midway through the first year of the war, rather than what they actually do, which is that they end up with them just by the end of the first year.
Yeah.
And then suddenly all of that problem of having to bypass fortifications and star bases and planets that you don't have the resources to actually occupy, that then falls away because you have these giant siege machines. But yeah, it's definitely fair to say that like fighting at Deep Space Nine would have given the Dominion, as I say, that it would have been a very different battle. It would have been far more of a grinding attrition. Probably not dissimilar to what actually happens at the Battle of Cardassia.
Oh, yes.
So that would be my guess, is that, yeah, and like you say, Dukat doesn't want anyone else to get the credit, and I think he wants to win that sort of that sweeping style victory. He wants to win his Trafalgar. He wants his he's a bit like General Lee at Gettysburg. He wants to win the sweeping Napoleonic victory.
That's often very attractive because that's also the glorious one which can give them glory. And the thing about the Cardassians is they do love glory.
Mm-hmm.
They do love the status of victory.
Even more than the Klingons.
Yes, because the Klingons, it's going to sound strange, the Klingons' glory is great. And it gives you personal status. For the Cardassians, Klingon can allow you to become ruler of Cardassia.
Yes, it acquires far more political weight.
Because you have to remember, the Klingons are a warrior society which has a militaristic bent.
Mm-hmm.
The Cardassians are a military-run society.
Yes. Yeah. So it occupies a much more actually central place within their culture and just literally how the government works there.
Yes, because you have to remember there's nothing equivalent to the great houses in Cardassia.
Mm-hmm.
They would never have tolerated someone like Gul Dukat being in charge of them.
No. Yes, because he is a complete upstart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just round this off with a few frames of the aftermath of Operation Return, but effectively, because you had so many Dominion fleets pull back, and then of course the Dominion then realize, oh, we're not getting those reinforcements, we better withdraw to more defensible lines. So we end up getting this mass retreat, which broadly speaking goes well for the Dominion, except that you end up with several fleets just getting trapped.
That doesn't really surprise me. Again, it's a retreat from engagement, a line of engagement by people who are not really trained with the experience to do that. But I would... Again, one of the things of when you have this massive withdrawal, and it is a massive withdrawal.
Yes. I mean, reality is that it is several weeks of
fighting,
of running battles.
And the thing is also, this is going to sound a little bit strange, but one of the problems you have also is as the Federation recapture territory, they don't have to rebuild it. So they're going to be slowed down.
Mm-hmm.
They are going to be slowed down.
I mean, fortunately, you obviously have the fleets that fought at Operation Return, and they're able to form a little bit of an initial guard force, I suppose, like threaten. But then also, you do then have a lot of Klingons who are then basically on the loose. Because again, yes, the Klingons like to charge into a giant melee, but they also quite like open order pursuit. Because they've got that brigade system where you can literally just break your fleet into 3 or 4 parts, and each of those is going to basically be capable of certainly harrying large portions of the enemy force.
We've been talking a lot about the various command structures and how they're adapting to the situation. Yes. And that's really the situation you're dealing with. And this is the problem you're dealing with from these ranking systems. All these things can affect how your command structure is going to adapt to the scenario you're in. And for the Dominion and the Cardassians, it's very good when they are able to dictate the pace of the battle, where they're able to dictate the pace of engagement, where they have a steerage hand on the operations.
Yeah.
When they lose that control, things get bad. And that's their problem. That's the strength of the Klingon and the Federation systems, are that they have far more resilience within their command structure for when things go wrong.
Right, yeah. And so they're able to fight. They are able to fight from that underdog position, and take on a fight which is nominally weighed against them.
Yeah, nominally. Yeah. And that's also I'd say it's also because they do the ship command stuff so well. That's one of the reasons why I do hold it against the Federation quite bad, how badly they do the fleet command stuff. Because it's sort of a case of, okay, yeah, but you run your ships better than this. Why are you not just translating one to the higher rank? It would be better. It's not the same. You don't run a fleet the same way you run a ship, but it would still be better if you just did that. It would still be better than what you're doing now.
Yeah. It's basic translation of principles, and that's something that does come out very well, as we've said. I think I've probably said it before in TNG, and why Picard absolutely feels like Admiral material, because he runs his ship like a staff officer.
Yes, it's like it's run like it's a fleet. And it makes sense. It almost makes the choice of ranking system, where they've gone with very much what I would call the English ranking model, the wrong option for them. Because if they'd gone with, let's say, the French ranking model, which is their equivalent to Lieutenant Commander is Capitaine de Corvette, and then Commander's Capitaine de Frigate. And then the ship of the line captain is, the captain de vaisseau is equivalent to full captain in Royal Navy or US Navy scenario. And that translates to ship of the line captain. And that means you have multiple people on a ship who can be addressed as Capitan.
Yeah.
But everyone knows which is the Capitan who's the captain of the ship. Yes. But the point is, it means that if anything happens to the captain, then the person who takes over is also a captain.
Yes. And it's not like, say, having, you end up with 2 people at lieutenant commander. So let's say we've both lost the captain and the commander. Obviously this is not obviously disastrous scenario.
Which one of you is the senior Capitaine de Corvette? Take over.
Yeah.
And you're still a captain, and people feel they've still got a captain in charge. They might not be the same rank of captain, but they are still a captain.
Yeah. And then, and in the case of something like the Dominion War, where, realistically there should be a lot of small ships going around, you do then have all these people that you can say, we now have ships for you to command.
Yes, you should be literally going, oh, this Capitaine de Corvette gets a Corvette. This Capitaine de Corvette gets a Corvette. Every Capitaine de Corvette gets a Corvette. It should be like Oprah Winfrey giving out cars.
I mean, it's one of the things I will say. There's that whole thing, just circling all the way back to the beginning with Sisko's, promotion, quote unquote, to the staff. But it does make sense that Dax is in command of the Defiant. That is kind of the rank you want in command of a ship that size.
Yes. And I must repeat, yes. And she is a commander. She's a Capitán de Frigata. In French or Spanish naval terms, that is what she is. And why am I bringing this up is because, again, we've been talking about, this scenario for the Dominion when they're pulling back and the Cardassians when they're pulling back. And that maneuver always seems to me to stress their forces far more than the withdrawals have stressed the Federation and the Klingon forces when they were forced to withdraw.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Because they are, again, structured similar in closer to the Imperial Japanese Navy. And the trouble is they haven't got those officers at those levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for the Cardassians, I suppose it's a combination of, well, if you have any semblance of an ability to command a ship, well, we need everyone we've got, so you're commanding a ship. And also, it's probably a political thing of, again, is a Cardassian commander really going to be happy to nurture what could be the person who undermines and replaces him?
The other issue is that the Cardassian chain of command has completely collapsed after DS9 because of Gul Dukat.
Well, yeah, that too.
And then you have the Dominion fleet, which is not structured around having the middle-ranking officers. Because, let's be honest, the Jem'Hadar, whilst they might be ship commanders, it's more like you've got senior NCOs running ships.
Which makes them very efficient.
Very efficient, very capable fighters. But you've almost got an officer class and an NCO troop class. Where your officer class are mostly trained towards diplomacy rather than combat.
Yes. Yeah, again, missing, much like their fleet, missing that entire sort of middle section.
And its trouble is when you're doing a fighting withdrawal, the officers you need, the officers, the people you need who are going to be adapting are going to be that middle row. In Starfleet, they're the senior captains, which they always seem to have oodles and oodles of running around, coordinating their local forces.
Yeah. But the Cardassians, because the authority goes all the way to the top.
Yeah.
That
the middle rank aren't trained to do it.
Yeah.
Because they're the threat to the top.
Yes. Yes, which is why you do end up with mostly a bunch of Cardassian fleets captured at the end, rather than a large number of Jem'Hadar.
Because NCOs being NCOs, they usually find a way to, oh great, the officers have mucked up. Let's just find our own way back for our ship.
Yes.
And we probably won't get told off.
Yes, I can definitely see Jem'Hadar doing that.
We've been ordered to withdraw. We'll withdraw.
Yeah. And, there's Federation ships looking for us. Okay, well, we need to work out a way to get through. That sort of, working through a problem as it presents itself. It's not going to be perfect. Not everyone is going to make it. But then you have the complete inverse with the Cardassians, where just everything is paralyzed. So the legate in command of the fleet, he's waiting for his instructions on exactly where it is he needs to go, and they're not coming, and so he's just kind of best guessing it. It's like, oh, how far back are we withdrawing? Are we falling back to a rally point?
And the trouble is, for the legate in command, is if he does too good a job, he could find himself being the next target of interesting inquiries. So,
yes.
Does he want to do, or do they want to do too good a job?
Well, yes. I mean, I was about to say, what's the harm in potentially sitting out the rest of the war in a Federation prison?
No, that sounds ultimately far more comfortable.
That sounds. I'm not going to get stabbed in the back by other Cardassians or the Dominion or
And also, there's the fact that how many of them really liked the alliance with the Dominion and the
to
relationship with the
begin
Dominion.
with.
How many of them
Yes,
saw
and
the way it
then
was going.
how many of them personally actually liked Gul Dukat specifically?
Well, he's dead, so that's less of an issue. But there's the fact of the Legate 2 thinking, well, if I get back, will I get command? And that's the other interesting thing. I was surprised that in the number of Legates who didn't... Damar gets, of course, command, but I'm surprised that didn't involve more fighting.
Yeah, well, I think the Dominion just said he's in command now because he's an idiot and we can control him. And, you know, everyone was probably smart enough to read the room and say, okay, yeah, I won't try and compete with your chosen useful idiot.
Yes, but the trouble is, and this is the problem for the Dominion at that point. Gul Dukat at least had enough victories and enough stuff behind him, and had done enough that he had a personal narrative that could allow others to believe that actually there was a Cardassian
There's
leader
something
in
there.
charge.
Yeah.
Dumar doesn't have any of that.
Yeah, no one is buying that this guy is actually in charge.
And the fact that you didn't have more problems with the Cardassians from that point onward is a surprise to me.
Yeah.
With the level of militarized society they are. I'm surprised at that point you do not get a civil war breaking out immediately in Cardassia between the faction who are happy Dumar's being put... the faction who support the Dominion and Damar being put in charge, and the faction which are going no, because we've now been annexed by the Dominion and we won't be annexed by the Dominion.
And this moron is blatantly a Dominion puppet. I'm not going to stand for this.
And with the way the Cardassians work, it only takes a few legates to decide that.
Yeah, and there are definitely Cardassians out there that certainly have the clout to do it. But equally, then there's that whole thing of, but the Cardassians don't like to necessarily do anything too hastily. Plans within plans within plans.
Yeah. They do like to make things complicated. Especially for themselves.
So, yeah, I mean, with the Klingons, something like that would probably happen instantly.
With the Klingons, in the nicest way, they'd have never managed to unite behind the alliance with the Dominion in the first place, because it would have looked too lopsided. They had enough trouble allying with the Federation, who they basically considered to be neutered idiots.
Yes.
You know. The Dominion with the Jem'Hadar, no.
But it's like in one of my episodes, there's again fairly early in the war, the Battle of Arcadia, and the Klingons take repeated losses. Again, part of this general fallback, and I think it's the Battle of Janus, and they really do have a good setup, but the commander in charge just isn't. Basically, is old guard, and he's not wired for defensive warfare. He's an old school Klingon of like the 23rd century, which is attack all the time. And so then after they end up retreating from Janus, after taking losses, he then gets challenged by one of his brigadiers, who then takes over the fleet after him.
Yeah.
And it's like, the Klingon command structure is, again, that's the other thing. It's somewhat robust in terms of weeding out particularly people who aren't up to snuff for what it is they're currently doing.
Yeah, and that's some of the issues I would argue for them in that for the Klingons, that can mean that they get very good commanders, but it also can mean that you have briefed a commander on a plan, and suddenly that commander is no longer doing the plan.
Yes, that is a. Although the idea is, of course, with Klingon fleets is that again that idea of mission command, so that the senior officers of any commander should know what the mission objective is, and their mere disagreement is how to go about carrying it out.
Theoretically.
Yeah, ideally.
If the commander has been carrying out policy properly, which if they haven't been carrying out policy properly in one area, the odds are they haven't been carrying out properly in another, isn't it?
Yeah. That's true. That is true. So yeah, it's by no means is it a foolproof system for ensuring a fit and robust command structure, but at least they don't have to put up with admirals saying, "But what about my Earth?"
No, they never have to put up with someone saying, "But what about Kronos?"
Yeah.
The idea of
who cares?
In a nice way, if you try to invade Kronos, good luck to you and your army.
But that is just an instance of where you could turn a minor defeat into what it actually was, which was a complete rout. And I suppose just to wrap things up, you could say the same thing with the Battle of Deep Space Nine.
Yeah. It's in the nicest way, if they had been running it properly, also, there's the thing of what they could have done is with those fleets which weren't engaged, those three fleets which weren't engaged at one point, and called them back immediately to Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
While the other fleets form up.
And then you have an immediate
could have called one
callback.
of them back. Just one of them.
Yeah. I mean, that is 100 ships.
Yeah.
Plus Deep Space Nine.
Anything leaks through to Deep Space Nine, it's gone.
Yeah, Defiant breaks through, and then it gets to Deep Space Nine, and it's like, oh no,
not getting any further.
Yeah,
but for that scenario, you have to actually be thinking sensibly. You have to actually be thinking, hang on, what happens if I do lose, or what happens if this goes wrong?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you can't have this presumption that everything is going to go your way just because it looks like it right now. Because war is chaotic. So yeah, it's I suppose it's the tactics. There's issues on both sides with the tactics employed. But as we've kind of I think covered, is that it's the force organization that ultimately really determines the winners and losers in that battle.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, again, is this is an all-or-nothing fight they've put in, and the force which really needs to win this battle, in fact, the Dominions, if we go back to the beginning, victory in this battle is control of the wormhole. That's what this battle's about. For the Federation, it's about gaining control of the wormhole. For the Dominion, it's about keeping control of the wormhole. And that's the first principles of this battle. And the fact that they've basically sacrificed everything to do a battle in the middle of space and have not reinforced their position, even if you do have Deep Space Nine there, in the nicest way, you don't rely on a space station in the middle of space to secure something, because it can't move. And the enemy can always bring more stuff into its scenario. The enemy can choose when they engage and not. It's a very strong position there. It's something which is going to discourage raiders and small ships, but You need a fleet there to back it up.
Yep.
You need a fleet there to give it the maneuverability. And nicest way, the lesson of that has been every time when they were dealing with the Klingons, every time they've had trouble, what have they been having to do? Wait for a fleet to arrive to support them.
Yes. And then suddenly no one wants to fight Deep Space Nine when there's a fleet there too.
Yes. Because you combine the two things, the sheer amount of firepower from the station and a fleet manoeuvring around, you've got problems. So again, in this scenario, they didn't need all those fleets there. They could have had a front row of enough fleets, and they could have had one fleet less in their back row right from the beginning, and they would have been fine.
Yep. They would have still been able to do everything that they were planning on.
They form up with 12 fleets. They could have done everything with 11. Quite happily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then from the Federation side, any sort of issues, concerns, things that could have been done better?
Well, again, for the Federation perspective, to an extent the battle is written for them to be a hero ship. And that's the annoying problem. The battle is written for it to be a hero ship. But we've already talked about how the Klingons could have attacked from a different angle, but they didn't. They went for it straight for the jugular. With the Federation, to an extent, they needed an extra 2 fleets.
Mm-hmm.
And they needed those extra 2 fleets to come in and sit behind the wings so that they can get turned. Because they're going into the scenario where they're outnumbered 2-1. And any sensible commander in charge of the Cardassian and Dominion forces would have immediately gone, oh, right then, the moment your fleet is fully engaged in my line, okay, split my rear line, send them round, attack from behind, annihilate.
Mm-hmm. And that critically, I mean, the Cardassians could have still done that, but presumably part of the problem was Dukat hadn't told any of his subordinates that was the plan.
No. Because why would he? Because that means they might do it before he gives them the order, and they might take the glory. Because they made the decision, not him.
So, yes. I mean, I think that's a pretty in-depth summary of Operation Return, then, for everyone. I think we've probably looked at everything.
If you'd ever like to do more of these, I'd be happy to do them again.
Oh, yeah,
it's a lot of fun.
See what people say in the comments.
If the people in the comments would like to hear I have more of them, I'd enjoy it. Because it's one of those... It's a fun thing to do. And yeah, it kind of the other issue you have is that even once the Klingons arrive, and even once the fleet has been stopped coming through the wormhole, if the Cardassian and Dominion command structure hadn't decided to dissolve itself as quickly as it did, pretty much in that scenario, they could have still won that battle, because they still had numbers on their side.
Absolutely, they could.
And if they had won that battle, even without the reinforcements coming through the wormhole, the Federation would have lost so much.
That's a devastating blow.
Yes, it is. And you could argue the Federation were at risk of that because the Federation didn't send enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, undercommitted.
And that sounds a strange thing usually to explain to people when you're talking about it. But let me put it this way: there are battles which you can afford to lose, and you commit forces which you can afford to lose to them. Battles you can't afford to lose, you commit everything you can get your grubby hands on and more to them. Because you can't afford to lose that battle. Those are the battles where you see stuff poured in that you can't, has no right to be there.
Yes, and at the other side of it for the Dominion, as you say, okay, yeah, they're at their limit right now, but equally, the Vorta are perfectly happy to switch to a much more long-term plan to fight the war.
Yes. They are perfectly happy to do that. They always have a long-term plan.
Yes, and fundamentally, of course, the core territory of the Dominion, the Gamma Quadrant, that's not being threatened at all.
No.
So, almost anything they do here is a bonus.
Yeah. They are fighting.
And for the Federation,
they are fighting and spending entirely lives not of their own.
yeah. And for the Federation and the Allies, it's a life or death struggle.
Yes. Which is again why it's kind of surprising again that well, it probably relates to how much time is available for the Klingons, but the war's been going on for a while, so why they only have 3 fleets available to call in, who knows? And the Federation themselves also penny pinching themselves. Because you go back to that earlier map of fleets, and you look at what they have defending Earth, and in the line of Earth, and there is realistically a scenario where you go, well, you know, if you'd brought some of those fleets forward with you, some of those fleets, you'd be in a far, far stronger position. A far, far stronger position for this fight. And you know, there are options. There are fleets out there which we've talked about how the fact that, you know, there's various battles going on. Okay, battles for Vulcan, etc. These things you can't leave. But any fleet which isn't actively engaged or actively causing trouble on the line of contention should have been called. Should have been called. There are the 2 Klingon fleets at Arcadian Rigel.
Yep.
You know, there's the Klingon fleet behind Vulcan. You know, these are things, these are options which they should have been considering calling up and calling into the fight. Because they're not tying down opposite numbers, because if you consider the fleets at Ikar and Pankantar from the Federation, the Arcadian Rigel fleets, and the Zeranti fleet, are basically being tied down by, 3 fleets, and let's be honest, you only need really 3 fleets to tie them down. So you could take more fleets from there, and then suddenly the whole we've got 3 Klingon fleets, we've got 6 Federation fleets versus 12 fleets. Well, hang on, add on another 3 fleets, you've suddenly got 12 fleets versus 12 fleets.
Yes, and then suddenly the dynamics of the battle change very much, and I don't think Dukat's plan would have. Dukat would have had to fight the battle differently. Maybe in that instance, he would have actually withdrawn to Deep Space Nine to fight a big battle because he's not going to be as overconfident. That's
a potential scenario, but again, what if they were sensible and they were setting it up, is again they'd go forward with like the 7, 8 Federation fleets. He'd feel confident against them probably still, and then the 5, 6 Klingon fleets appear,
come through. Yes, and that changes the dynamic a lot.
Yeah, and that's the thing. He's banking on the Klingons not being there, but if you have those extra 2 Federation fleets, you'd be surprised how much that changes the battle dynamic from the point of view of being able to punch through the lines, because if you have the wings more secure, you can do far more with the centre.
Yeah, and that frees up just an awful lot of action, as you say, that you can undertake.
We don't have that many ships. So we are in a situation where either a situation requires the whole fleet goes, or none of the fleet goes. It's either a crisis which requires the fleet to turn up en masse, or not, or none of the fleet goes, because we can't afford to spend ourselves in penny packets in small battles.
Yeah.
So if it's important enough, then the whole fleet goes. If it's not important, we stay where we are. And this is the point for the Federation. They seem to be, in their preparation for this battle, missing the reality that it's either important enough that it requires the whole fleet, and you send everything you can get, as to use the phrase I used earlier, your grubby mitts on.
Mm-hmm.
Or does it really require it? And I know someone's going to say in the comments, but Starfleet's not a military organisation. But in the nicest way, they are charged with military duties. They are charged with the protection of Federation space. And they are charged with doing enough war fighting that they have got... In the nicest way, they should be doing a lot of military history study.
Yes. It certainly shouldn't be an option.
And it is militaristic enough that, frankly, yes, it is. It's in the nicest way, it's a military organisation with extra steps.
Yes. Yeah. Terribly sorry, but it appears that OBS broke before we did. This is where Dr. Clarke's side of things ends, so I'll just wrap things up for the both of us. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little collaboration. I won't call it little. It was quite a substantial collaboration. I hope you all enjoyed, had a great time. Absolutely, of course, go check out Dr. Clarke. Go subscribe to his channel, Naval History with Dr. Alex. Tremendous fun. Very interesting stuff. And once again, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and I will see you all in the next video.